I've gone back with my work to around 2019. So it was just from university in my second year, end of year show. So this piece is titled Carnality. And during that period of time, really, I was sort of exploring how I can apply paint and its language in order to represent flesh. I don't work like this anymore. However, within the present, I wouldn't be where I am now without working like this. So it was heavily influenced by lots of colour I was looking into, lots of gestures, just how I could create so much chaos within a piece of work. And then this piece I produced not too long after, so it was like start of my third year, again in 2019. It started off really as a study of this piece Balkan Baroque by Marina Abramovic. I think I said that right, I hope I did. It just sort of began really as like a study where I was just looking into the form, colour, but obviously it doesn't end that way. And that piece I found was an incredible learning curve within my practice, as it began so much more. It was like the animalistic side of the human I started to explore from that, and like butchery and carcass, and how I could just paint flesh, really, just go on a complete, like, random, chaotic monstrosity, handling of media, very visceral, and just going on a frenzy, really. And then the start of this year, third year, so that was 2020, it began an exploration with like painting as sort of a bodily experience. And I've always found that. I've always found painting to be quite cathartic. I just began to sort of immerse myself a lot more within my work, so performance, again with that bodily experience. So I started looking in like myself, into the connections with my works, obviously very visceral, very raw, very grotesque. And there's always that physicality within the handling of my media. That's something that I am very much interested in, as well as dense textures. And yeah, this piece sort of began really as like a little dance, I would say, with this sculptural carcass I made. Obviously, I exaggerated that a lot more, as that carcass didn't look anything like that. And I would say that's heavily informed my practice now, as well as my processes, which I'll speak about in a bit, of that idea of performance leading to the arrival of a painting. What an image, eh? Again, right now, this piece was as a result of lockdown. I was very limited with my materials. So I just took what I could really from my studio in university and what I could sort of fit in my current studio, which is my bedroom. By having like my studio in my bedroom, sort of completing my degree in that way, I found that I was living and breathing within such close proximity to my work that it really encouraged me to interrogate my subject matter of flesh a whole lot more, as well as having a lot more fun, I would say, with my work, because I'm constantly living with it. So I'm always gaining a new insight and a new perspective into what I'm doing. So talking about this piece, I had a sculpture. It was just like a little cardboard linen thing that I was hoping to exhibit as well as part of my degree show, but obviously that didn't happen, unfortunately. So I was like, I've got this object, what can I do with it? So I stuck it on my head, and then this thing just emerged. It was sort of like, what do I call it? My flesh hazmat suit. So again, sort of evoking that idea of the now, the present, where I find myself in this world. So it sort of became as like a form of personal protection equipment. And again, from that, part of my process emerged was I perform and then I draw. So that is that there. This is an image of Connor. I am not sure if he's watching, but he did allow me to put this in there, because then that idea actually of sort of wearing your work, wearing your sculptures with that flesh on flesh, skin on skin, visceral, point of contact sort of came into play. And I am hoping to return to a series like this at some point, where hopefully with my parents, if they'll allow me, just to have like loads of these sculptures, just stick them on people's heads. So there's like, you don't really know who exactly this figure is beneath the work, and just creating like a series of mugshots from that. Also to add here, I've always found, this might help people understand my work a lot more figuratively, that the anatomy of the physical object of a painting itself has always interested me, as I've always found that the frame is the skeleton, and then when you stretch the material on top, so your surface, which can be like canvas, your linen, or your calico, that's sort of the flesh, and then the actual painting on top of that becomes the skin. Yeah. So this is core to my process. So I sculpted the shoes, then I wore the shoes, and I also performed wearing the shoes. That's still. Also the dress as well, that was an old painting, as you can see, and then there's the return of the headpiece in the back, and then I drew from it, and then I painted from it. So process is very much part of my work. So I would sculpt, and then I would like video the performance, or photograph that, and then from that I would draw, and I would paint. But looking back at this painting in particular, like the textures, they're not where I want them to be right now, because I'm always learning, I'm always finding the imperfect within the perfect, and I always like to sort of exaggerate more really what's not actually there. And then that leads me, part process again, so the shoe sort of became this giant exaggerated mouth. Again, sculpturally, I use whatever materials I can find to hand, so such as, I know at the time when I was making these, I was wearing false nails. It was completely inappropriate because they kept getting caught, so I just pulled them off and I just shoved them on there. And I think there's actually some cotton buds on there too. So yeah, this is my usual painting process, because this talk is primarily about painting. So something I used to do when I used to work hyper-realistically, yeah, that's the word. And I've returned to it ever since, especially now, because I want to achieve such a graphic, raw quality to my work that is quite shocking. Yeah, it's quite sinister and quite repulsive at times, which is nice to provoke. I'll speak about that a bit later on. So there'd be an ochre, which would be like the first base, and then sort of like a burnt sienna. It gives me that bit of mid-layer to work with, followed by, where is it again? Burnt umber. There you go. That is it. So I always work like that. So that's part of my process. That is the final painting, but however, rather is one like that. I prefer looking at the close-ups, prefer to sort of see how I produce the piece, even though they're completely like unintentional. Like when I paint, I don't really know where my work will lead me next, and I guess it's that fluidity which I find very, very exciting when I'm producing my work. And again, back to that idea of exaggeration, you can see that was light for us. It was very smooth surface to paint, but I wanted to exaggerate that and make it more animalistic and more grotesque by having like weird points to the internal, makes the external, make it more bloodier, make it more gutsier. And I would say, like, when I paint, that's the most exciting part at the end of the painting, where it just becomes more real. It's no longer this pretty picture on the wall. It just becomes bloodier. And it's just all these reds. The spectrum of red is phenomenal. Same with like spectrum skin tones. Like, this is breathtaking how many skin tones are out there. It's beautiful. Yes. I don't usually share any of my little performance pieces with anyone. I usually just show like a few stills maybe on Instagram. And speaking of Instagram, right now during lockdown in particular, I found that to be the best way where I can get my work shown to the world. And I'm lucky enough at the moment, lots of opportunities have arose from that, such as today I entered this open call and then I got into it. So that's in first site in Colchester, and that was nice to know. So yeah, I'll show this little clip. It makes me laugh, honestly, looking back at some of the videos. Oh, here we go. Okay, so this is part of an exhibition right now in Haydn Grange Art Centre, which is quite local to me. And these are 3 pieces which obviously have been exhibited there. So I'll start from left to right. Left, the dirty clean. In the middle is the loudmouth, and then fairy tale COVID-19. The dirty clean, right. I've been told quite recently, actually, this has caused quite a bit of controversy between the viewer and the piece of work. So obviously that fueled my work a lot more, knowing that I was like, oh, that's brilliant. That's exactly the reaction I want to provoke from the viewer. Yeah, and it's nice to actually see as well that my last painting I produced in my BA got into an exhibition. So that does mean a lot to me. But back to provoking the viewer, I think that when you look at it, you automatically assume it might be period blood. So there's that idea of the taboo going on, but it really isn't. It's just an exaggeration of blood from these sculptures in the bathroom. I'll speak more about the bathroom later on, simply because it's a space where I currently find myself, and it's just very fascinating. Like, due to lockdown, being forced to see these domestic spaces differently. I also adore the curation of this little exhibition, because right opposite it, by here, there's a nice dialogue generated between, this is a sink, and obviously there's no bathtub. So again, drawing's part of my process, but I don't normally draw like as a preparatory process. I just sort of just draw the images I like, with whether or not there's like a protrusion or something going on. So yeah, there's not too much to say about these. So the bathroom, okay. Yeah, as I just said, forced to sort of figure out new spaces where I can present my work. That I think is from the 360 videos or something. So sort of the idea of having like this creature thing in the tub coming out, putting these shoes on, sort of a literal conversation going on, and then there's the creature headmask thing, and then just walk away casually out there. I'm actually thinking of returning to that and doing some sort of like video work where I actually have the camera like being looking down on that scene, and myself being like immersed out of all there and wearing the shoes, just going out on a whirlwind. And I might actually paint that, because I love that. Like, I find as well, keep returning to old pieces of work and just like finding a new meaning or like the new purpose behind them. And then there's the dirty clean again. That was really fun to paint. It was very challenging, as the white is not just one shade of white. Like, I kept layering my paints in such a way. I'd never achieved such a texture like that before, and I don't think I'll ever be able to achieve it again. But I can try. Like, I can't like force a piece of work out of myself. It just comes naturally. So sculptures again. Within these sculptures, actually, I know that there are some old paintings I use within them, and I just dissected them and then just reassembled them using stitching embroidery, surprisingly. So I've always found that hand of the artist is very similar to like the hands of the surgeon. It's a nice little comparison between them. And then the headpiece, found myself to be more immersed within the sculptures. Again, there's that sense of touch that keeps going on within my work. And then those sculptures, I've transformed them into a dress, and that dress is actually fully wearable. Yeah, it is. Yeah. And then obviously that dress then it became part of this series of work. So they're called the Bloodbath series, where I wore the dress, performed, took some nice images, and I painted from them. It's different for me, I find. Like, when I paint, I don't normally work on a landscape orientation. I usually work like portrait, because I find with portrait, obviously, and it's just that working portrait, I would say, is more confrontational between the viewer and oneself and the piece of work. But landscape, I find like working landscape, it was different because I've never really done it before. But it made it more involved, quite cinematic in a way. It's something I would consider doing again. But continuing with the idea of the bathroom, I've got this nice little piece of writing I keep finding myself returning to. So there's just something about the bathroom and that taboo associated with the figure and flesh that I'm really interested in right now. Ourselves as human beings spend pretty much a lot of time in the bathroom, probably as much as we do as in our beds. The bathroom is a very figuratively involved space, and I look for that in a room. The tiles, for example, they're just a hard shell where mould and stuff oozes out of them. The bathroom is a human behind closed doors, the sides of the human that we don't want to see. It's a very taboo place of personal intimacy. We sit on the toilet or in the tub or in the shower and think. It's a place of thought. We clean ourselves only to get dirty again. And these images are from my studio floor in university. I kept finding myself often looking more down at the floor, like looking down at it, rather than the walls themselves. They were just so fascinating, just seeing how my palette would just seep into floorboards. And out of everything from uni, I would say that these 3 images, my most influential to my practice within the current day, is the dirty, nitty grittiness of them that I just adore. These images, they just speak to me so much. They're so simple if you think about it. It's just dribbles of paint that's built up a layer over time. But there's just something about them that heavily involves my current practice and my current palette. I just adore them so much. Okay, back to these. That painting the naked butchery from the start, produced about a year ago. I would have never expected a year ago for myself to be wearing it. And again, back to that idea of not showing one's face within a piece of work. I'd like to cut my face off so the viewer sort of questions, who is it? Who's the figure in the work? So I wore it, and then this one, oh, here we go, we're back. It's just full of limbs. That's something I find really, it's quite disturbing when you like exaggerate your body in these odd positions and you're not really quite sure exactly what it is you're looking at. Like, I like to produce a piece which is so intriguing yet disturbing, and you can't help but find yourself lost within it. Like, it's the beauty within disgust, really. It's that idea of producing something so disturbing, but yet you're still looking at it and you're like, wow, what is that little feature? And again, that's a sculpture of mine, which I just put my foot in. It's very difficult to walk like that. I fell over a few times. And right, back to this piece. I cannot stand this piece for the life of me. So it's quite recent. It was about 6 foot by 3 foot. I produced it in my bedroom. Like a dipstick kind of thing. I think I said that right. There's actually my hair in there, which I collected quite a few times. I just washed my hair in the bath. Something I tend to do now, and like just throw it into my work. It's like a barbed wire, but that piece is very uncanny. I think, like, painting it was the scale of the piece, which, like, I'm not usually like freaked out or disturbed by the work I produce, but this piece had an effect on me which I could not describe to anyone. It was just simply bizarre. I'm not sure like why. It might be because the spine's at an odd angle and it's just that stare. Like, as I was painting it, the actual image I was using, there wasn't a direct point, like eye contact, there wasn't direct eye contact. So as I was painting it, I kept looking at myself like in the mirror and did a bit of research as well onto there, like, who is it, Rembrandt? I think that's it, who produced self-portraits by looking in the mirror. You become more aware of yourself and become more aware of yourself within your work. And that is my cat outside my bedroom door, but I will leave it. But again, looking back at this piece, there's masks, again to do with the current times, but I was sick to death of seeing people outside not wearing their masks in the right place, just over their mouths. So I decided to paint 3 masks in 3 places that I've seen people wear them, apart from over their eyes. Again, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but I quite like that. But this piece doesn't exist as that anymore. It's just cut up into little mini abstracts. Yeah. What's happened there? Here we go. This is recent work. Again, the naked butchery has become a tongue. now, and it's just some sculpted teeth. I really want to get some vampire teeth now and just do a weird performance with them. Like the other week, what was I doing? I was just chewing lipstick, just I know, right? Not really. I was just chewing lipstick, just sort of filming that, experimenting a bit of video, might paint from it. But it would be nice, I think, to actually have like a set of vampire teeth and just start chewing this lipstick. Like I find femininity as well, and like the idea of the monstrous femme and all that taboo associated with that, and like works its way into my practice. Like my practice isn't just flesh, it's flesh, but there are so many different undertones that go within it. Yeah, at times it can get quite like, whoa, what am I doing? But I enjoy it, which is the main, because I'm always like learning new things about my work and learning new things about myself. Like I just really don't know where my work will lead me next. Like I could be thinking of one thing. Like I originally, for example, I was thinking of making this as a book. Obviously that didn't happen. I was thinking of making it as like a little book with all these little close-ups in. And that didn't happen. It became this thing with some big lips and cosmetic surgery as well. I've always been fascinated by that. I just don't understand the logic of like people having it to make like the faces just distorted if they don't really need it. Like I think people should just embrace what they've got and deal with it in a good way, obviously. But yeah, these images, the bathroom, yeah. And this middle image, for example, like the floor, it wasn't wet at all, but it looks so greasy. But I just captured that in the moment where all these pores from the tiles start to show up. And I might paint these images. I'm looking at them now and I'm like, yeah, I could see these as a composition or something. And the foot as well. Woo! Yeah, I would love to draw that. Oh, these are great. And this, all right, this slide is just some works in progress. So I was going through my archive and I just realised that's in the way. I apologise. Yeah, I just found some little snippets, maybe some ideas I might paint in the future. Like that's all those sculptures, I might just like stack them so it look like a figure with an old painting in the background. That's not actually wine, it's Ribena. And then just something to do with the dining table. Like I would say that flesh. Why do I paint flesh? Why am I so involved with flesh? All my work is like the flesh, it's the excess fat, flesh, whatever you want to say about it, that I don't want on my body. So it goes into my work. So that's just like a little outcome of some performances. The shoes I made were actually from Kleenex tissue boxes, where one day I was finished with the tissue box, brought my foot, start sliding around my bedroom, and I was like, I can make a pair of shoes out of these. And they were never, ever intended to be exhibited, but they were, which was the bonus. And I find as well when I'm like just finishing a painting, it just needs the final few touches or whatever. I always put white paint on the back of my hands, probably why I get eczema on it occasionally. But it's just, it has that purity. Like my palettes, they completely clogged up with acrylic paint. I use acrylics, not oils. I think I would like eventually progress into oil paint. But with acrylics, I like to give the illusion that I do use oil because acrylics are so artificial, but I like to use them in a very naturally organic way that like makes the viewer sort of think, oh, what is it she's using? Oh, it's oils. No, it's acrylics. It's oils. No, it's acrylics. I've had that before and it's quite funny to watch. Oh, what's happening there? There we go. Right, these images, I took them years ago, but I found myself returning to them only recently. It's from Body Wheel's exhibition in Amsterdam. I think it was in like 2018, but I keep finding myself returning to them. I'm always returning to like old things and just thinking of new ways of why I like them and stuff. So just the hair, and that looks like a giant tongue, and it looks like it's pulled back and all these intestines. I was going through this PowerPoint earlier with my dad actually, and he said, is that something you did? And I was like, no, Dad, I wish I did though. It looks very floral and very delicate and feminine. But yeah, I'm just really fascinated by these right now. And this is something very recent I am currently looking at. Like, what's happened to my map? There we go. I'm always looking at how I can paint here, for example. And this image has taught me that. Just here on the side of the bathtub, it's like that wet on wet is the best way I find to paint here. It just flows and you get like a nice shadow with a bit of a glimmer of a highlight. And this image, all right, I posted it on my Instagram not too long ago. I didn't really tell what people didn't tell people what it was. And some people thought it was paint. There's actually period blood. It's just that, because like people would grimace. They were like, oh, that's disgusting. It's quite squeamish. No, it isn't. It's natural. And this bodily fluids, I realised like I am very fascinated by bodily fluids. But this image, some people thought it was like a little close-up of something, or it was just like maybe on like tea towel or something. But no, I was not. There we go. Wrong one. It's like, it's actually my period blood. And as I was looking at that image, it fascinated me how the pigment sort of sinks and just settles into that fabric, and that can obviously help me paint and help me sculpturally and like figure out my materials. But this image, I wasn't on my period here. I took this morning because this is my new body of work I'm currently working on. It disgusted me the other day in Wales, knowing that period pads and stuff like that were seen as non-essential items. And me being me, that fueled something in me. I was like, I have to respond to this somehow. Oh, it just made me so angry in a way. So it's very confronting. So I love the perspective of it as well, because it's like you're looking up and not too much is revealed, and these feet are huge. But that's where I am right now, working towards something like that. It's just, it is an essential product. What's happened there? And this is also where I am right now. I find like some point every year, I tend to produce and paint a self-portrait. Don't know when. They just happen as my practice does. It just flows. But every time I produce a self-portrait, I'm always finding that my handling of paint has got a lot better. Obviously, it would have, because I'm always learning. But it's just like pores. I love that little glimmer, like layers of paint. And skin tones, for example, our skin isn't opaque, so it shouldn't just be blobs of white just mixed together, so you have this opaque thing. We're built up in layers. Our skin's built in layers, paint is built up in layers. We are constantly being figuratively associated with paint. It's beautiful. But here as well, I'm fascinated by painting here, and just all these little fine pores, the little fine details, and that's not. Again, earlier I was speaking like through this with my dad, and he was like, you are kind of obsessed with bodily fluids and stuff. And I was like, I think I am. They're just great at paint because they just repulse people. But at the same time, there's something about them that captures the light, and they make them so real, make them so raw and so viscerally grotesque, and just, oh, yeah, I get passionate about this stuff. But yeah, and these are some influences of mine. Where to begin? Right, I know this one, David Bomberg. It's a landscape painting, but it's that nitty grittiness of the paint I absolutely adore. It's so dirty, and it's so human at the same time. And the sink painting by Lucian Freud, it's the rust, the tiles, just little bits of details, oh, just gorgeous. And Sutini, I think I said that right, Sutine, and the juiciness of how he handles his paint. Like, look at that. Ooh, so juicy. And then Francis Bacon. I've never seen his painting of his in the flesh, but I would absolutely love to. I'd probably faint if I did, because it's just so beautiful. And just understanding how he's approached the figure towards his later life from his earlier work, like he was looking at animals and the animalistic side of the human, and then moved towards the figure. By understanding one, you understand the other. It's like the same thing as like I find that to like paint the figure or the flesh, you need to understand the insides in order to understand the outside. It's like the start of my painting I showed on this. I was sort of looking more at the insides, and now I'm looking at the outsides and how one influences the other. They continuously bounce back and forth, back and forth. It's brilliant. Again. And I do look at performance artists within my research, and sculptors such as like Orland Cosmetic Surgery, Suzanne Lacey with her vampire teeth gnawing on this big carcass. Helen Chad at Loop My Loop, that is gorgeous, is pig's intestines wrapped around and intertwined with like real hair. It's just like the animal meets the human. And Sarah Lucas and Chicken Knickers, what a piece of work. And finally, this is my final slide. I put these 3 images in there because they're the little postcards on my wall are the first things I see when I wake up in the morning, and they're the last things I see at night before I turn my light off. So I have Lucian Freud's very intense glare, Jenny Savlin, the master, painting flesh, and Bacon and his beautiful beasts. So I hope I've covered everything I wanted to. How do I get out of this? I'm pressing it. Oh, there we go. So thank you very much for listening and watching, and feel free to ask some questions. Yeah.